Day 1.5, we are going to review simplifying, multiplying, and dividing rational functions. And the reason why I added this in is because at the end of the week, you are going to have an assignment check on these three things. So do you know how to simplify, multiply, and divide rational functions? So we'll do a few examples of each, and then your assignment will be practice. So the first thing that we looked at was simplifying rationals, and we looked at monomials, which is one term over one term. So a term is anything that's separated by a plus or minus. So if I jump down to this, in this fraction, the numerator, the top, has three terms. So each thing separated by a plus or minus, those are terms. So this is a trinomial, three terms, whereas this has one thing over one thing. So this one thing is called a monomial. All right, so let's go over how to simplify this, and we actually did this first semester in chapter 5 when we were simplifying exponents. So review. So we'll start with the coefficients, the numbers in front of the x's. So we have 10 and 45, and you want to reduce the fractions. So you want to think, what's the biggest number you can divide 10 and 45 by? All right, so if you do that, it ends up being 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and 45 divided by 5 is 9. So first step, simplify the coefficients. Now let's look at the x's. You have 4 x's on top and 1 x on the bottom. So if you don't know what that looks like, you can write it out. 4 x's on top and 1 on bottom. And you want to cancel any 1's. So we do that. We'll cancel the 1's. And when you do that, how many x's are left? We have 3 of them, and they're on the top of the fraction. So here's the reduced monomial. And you'll have to be able to do this on your assignment check and for the assignment. All right, let's take a look at number 2. Again, we have our coefficients first. We have the biggest number we can divide 48 by, and I believe that is 24. Let me double check. Nope, maybe 12. 60 divided by 12. Yes, so it is 12. So I'm going to divide each of these by 12. 48 divided by 12 is 4. 60 divided by 12 is 5, so 4/5. And now let's take a look at our x terms. We have x to the 4th on top and x to the 4th on bottom. What is any number divided by itself? It is 1. So our final answer ends up just being 4/5 because the x to the 4th will cancel. And our last example of the monomial, we have 18x squared over 15x to the 4th. So we'll start with 18 divided by 15. And again, we want to reduce the fraction. So you want to think what's the biggest number you can divide 18 and 15 by and not get a decimal. And it is 3. So 18 divided by 3 is 6. And 15 divided by 3 is 5. Now let's take a look at the x's. We have 2 x's on the top and 4 on the bottom. So when you think about this, think about how many will cancel and how many are left, and where are they? So we're going to cancel 2 sets. We have 2 left on the bottom, so x squared on the bottom. Okay, so those are some examples of simplifying monomials. In today's assignment, we'll use Delta Math, so if you still have trouble, it will show you worked out solutions. All right, let's jump to simplifying trinomials, which is 3 terms over 3 terms. So when you see something like this, you are going to first factor. So first step is we'll factor. When we factor this, if you have 3 terms and the first term is just a 1x squared, you can use that guess and check, or you could use box and circle. So for guess and check, it's what multiplies to negative 21. That adds to 4. All right, so let's think of some factors of 21. We have 1 and 21, but that won't work. We have 3 and 7, and that will work, but which one do we make negative? So it adds to a positive 4 and multiplies to negative 21, and that would be the 3. So when we factor that, we will get x minus 3, x plus 7. All right, let's do the same thing for the bottom. Again, it's just a 1x squared, so we can use this guess and check. So it multiplies to 63. That adds to 16. All right, so factors of 63 include 1 and 63, but that won't work. 9 and 7, and that does work. So 9 and 7 multiply to 63, and they add to 16. So let's put that here. So x plus 7, x plus 9. All right, so first step, if you have anything more than a monomial, is you want to factor it. Okay, next step is we'll cancel the 1's. Anything that is the same factor on the top and bottom. And so factors have to be the things contained in the parentheses. So the x plus 7's would cancel, and we're left with x minus 3 over x plus 9. and that is our final answer. Remember, you cannot cancel the x's if there's a plus or a minus right by them, and we did talk about why in one of the previous YouTube videos. All right, so there's our final answer. Okay, and so you will have some problems today where it's just a trinomial over trinomial or something like this, and you will factor and simplify. All right, the last type of problem will be multiply or divide rationals. So we'll do 2 examples of each of those, and then your practice will be on these 3 ideas, and you will have a quiz on this at the end of the week. All right, so when you're multiplying rationals, again, each of these is like a problem that we did above. So first step is we are going to factor each one. So let's take a look at just this part first. And factor. X squared minus 9 is the difference of squares. 2 square numbers being subtracted. So when you factor that, you'll get x plus 3, x minus 3. On the bottom, we want what multiplies to 15. That adds to 8, and that ends up being 5 and 3. All right, so there's our first one. Let's factor our second one, so times. And x minus 5 is already factored. There's not an x squared there, and there's nothing you can divide out of the x and the 5, so x minus 5. And then 9x is already factored as well. 9 times x is the same as 9x. Okay, so let's take a look at anything that we can cross off on the whole top and the whole bottom. So you look at the whole top and whole bottom. Notice there's an x plus 3 on top and bottom. There's also an x minus 5 on top and bottom. It doesn't matter if it's in one fraction or the other when you're multiplying. And then we're going to write what's left. We have x minus 3 over 9x. And there's our final answer. Okay, let's try one more where we multiply. First up, factor. In this 9x minus 36, there is a number you can divide out of each of those terms, and that number is a 9. So when we do that, we'll take our 9x minus 36 and divide each term by 9. 9x divided by 9 is x, and then 36 divided by 9 is 4. All right, so it's undoing the distributive property. If you want to check your answer, you can distribute, and you'll get what you started with. All right, so first pull out the 9. On the bottom, it's what multiplies to 32 that adds to negative 12. And so that'll be x, it'll be 8 and 4. They both have to be negative. So x minus 8, x minus 4. So when you add a negative 8 and negative 4, it's negative 12. But when you multiply a negative times a negative, it's a positive. All right, so there's the first one. Let's factor the second one. So again, we have an x squared or 1x squared. So it's what multiplies to negative 8 that adds to negative 7. All right, so that would be 8 and 1. And we have to make one negative, so it adds to negative 7. So that would be negative 8. So we have x minus 8, x plus 1. And on the bottom, notice we can divide each of these terms by 8. So let's pull out the 8. 8x divided by 8 is x, minus 72 divided by 8 is 9. So that one had greatest common factor, and it had that guess and check, or the difference of squares. Or box and circle, not difference of squares. All right, now, since it's being multiplied, we look at the whole top and the whole bottom. So just imagine drawing this line here. And you cancel any of the ones. So anything that's the same, we have x minus 4, we have x minus 8, and that's it. So we have the 9, x plus 1, over 8, x minus 9. And there's our final answer. Okay. Division is almost exactly the same as multiplying, except you flip the second fraction before you multiply. All right, so if we take a look at the first one, first up, factor. So we'll start with the x squared plus 3x. There is a greatest common factor. It is x. We can divide an x out of each of those. All right, so imagine, I don't have room here. So we'll have x squared divided by an x, and that leaves us with an x, and 3x divided by x, and that leaves us with a 3. So you divide an x out of each of those terms. The bottom is already factored, x minus 4, can't get any smaller than that. All right, and then we're going to multiply and we're going to flip. So actually I'll do this in 2 steps. So divide by, and let's factor the top. What multiplies to negative 21 adds to negative 4. I feel like we've done this one before. Have we done this one? Oh yeah, we did it up here. So it's x minus 3, x plus 7. Oh, but we have to change the sign, because it's negative 4. Was this one negative 4? No, it was positive 4. Okay, so this one should be a positive 3 and a negative 7. So it adds to a negative 4 and multiplies to negative 21. The bottom is what multiplies to 28 that adds to negative 11. All right, so that would be 4 and 7. Okay, So first up, factor. Second step, take that second fraction and you are going to flip it and then multiply it to the first. The first one you keep the same. X plus 3 over x minus 4. But then it's times, and then it's, we're going to flip the fraction. I should keep my colors the same. So now the numerator becomes the denominator becomes the numerator. So we have x minus 4, x minus 7 now on the top. And then we'll flip the x plus 3, the x minus 7 to the bottom. All right, so now just look at this part right here. We flipped the second one, and now it becomes a multiplication problem, so we'll draw our line across. We'll cancel anything that's the same on the top and the bottom. Ooh, a bunch of stuff cancels. And we're just left with an x. Okay, so that one is just x is the answer. Okay, and then last one. Again, this is all review of everything we've been doing this week, so hopefully it's not too difficult. All right, so for number 2, again, first up, factor. So we have x squared plus plus x minus 6. We want to know what multiplies to negative 6 that adds to a 1x. All right, so that would be, what, 2 and 3? So x plus 3, x minus 2 would multiply to a negative 6, add to a 1. The bottom is already factored as far as we can go. And now I'm going to flip and multiply. So flip. And here we have this x squared now goes on top, so that's x times x, but I'll leave it x squared. And then on the bottom, let's use a different color. This is difference of squares, so x plus 3, x minus 3. Okay, so we factored, we flipped, and so now you're going to squish everything together and cancel anything that's the same. So the x plus 3's go, the x minus 2's go. So on the top, we still have that x squared, and on the bottom, x minus 3. And there's your answer. So for review, again, it's another Delta Math assignment. So again, you're going to want to make an account at deltamath.com. Here's my teacher code if you haven't put that in. And here's the assignment for today. It's not that many problems. It might be, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 problems. You can do more if you want to, but I think it's just 7 or 8 required. And it practices all of these ideas. So you will go to this assignment, day 1.5, which is simplifying, multiplying, dividing rational functions, and try that assignment. You can check your answers, and if you have questions, stop into office hours. And remember, the quiz is coming up for this tomorrow.